My first memory of the Bioshock series is my uncle showing my dad the game because he was so impressed with the graphics and more specifically how the water looked. I can't remember if it was the original or the sequel, but I know it was definitely a Bioshock game. I think at this point though, I would have been too young to appreciate it, and with it being rated an 18 in the UK, there's no way my parents would have let me play it. Probably for the best, as I got frightened pretty easily as a child. Like a lot of the games that I'm going to cover on this channel, Bioshock is widely considered an all-time classic. On Metacritic, it's ranked as the 17th greatest game of all time. And then on IGN's definitive best games of all time list, Bioshock is ranked in 16th. And then on top of this, I have pretty strong anecdotal evidence, as one of my close mates, Matt, he loves this game and he's been pushing me to play it for a while. So without further ado, sit back, pour yourself a glass of Arcadia Merlot, and let's take a trip down to the city of Rapture. Bioshock is a 2007 narrative-driven first-person shooter developed by Irrational Games. It was first released for Xbox 360 and Windows, and then a year later a port was released for the PlayStation 3. It's a spiritual sequel to Irrational Games' previous project, System Shock 2, which was a critical success, but it struggled commercially. One of the founders of Irrational and the main visionary behind Bioshock, Ken Levine, tried pitching a sequel to Electronic Arts, but it was rejected due to the previous game's poor sales. By 2002, the team had come up with a core gameplay mechanic based on 3 groups. Drones that would carry a desirable resource, protectors that would guard the drones, and harvesters that would attempt to take the resources from the drones. These groups would eventually become the Little Sisters, the Big Daddies, and the Splicers that we see in the final game. One aspect of the game that was constantly changing was the setting. Originally, they were considering setting it in a derelict Nazi lab, and then for the first demonstration of the game, it was set in a space station which had become overrun with genetically mutated monsters. Levine wanted to avoid the cyberpunk theme out of fear of it being overplayed, and they eventually settled on the Art Deco underwater city of Rapture. By 2004, 2K offered to publish the game primarily based on the drone protector harvester concept, giving Irrational the freedom to develop the setting and story. The team grew from 6 to 60 people over the space of 2 years, which caused internal strife due to the lack of communication between the various teams within Irrational. Near the targeted release date, Levine ordered the team into round-the-clock development, creating even more unrest in the team. A critical playtest of the game occurred in January 2007, where initial feedback from players was mostly negative. Issues included the setting being too dark and players getting lost. Testers also distrusted the Atlas character, who at the time was voiced in a southern drawl. The team responded to the feedback by revamping the lighting, implementing a quest marker, and giving Atlas an Irish accent to make him seem more trustworthy.
Listen, I've got a family. I need to get them out of here, but the splicers have cut me off from them.
During another late-stage playtest, with the game reportedly being 99% complete, the playtesters still did not like the game as they felt no connection to the player character Jack. At this point, Bioshock did not have many cutscenes as Levine was fundamentally opposed to them. However, the following day, Levine and the lead group came up with a cheap way to resolve this, by adding the initial cutscene with the plane and the subsequent plane crash, as this helped to set the time frame, place the player in the role of the character, and allude to the "would you kindly" line later in the game. The total development costs were around $25 million, and many on the team would leave Irrational after Bioshock's release due to the difficult development process. The year is 1960. While the surface world is locked in the Cold War, you are introduced to Rapture, a sprawling Art Deco metropolis hidden at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Founded by Andrew Ryan, Rapture was designed as a rationalist utopia. It was a place where the artist would not fear being censored and the scientist would not be restricted by petty morality. However, by the time you arrive, the dream has rotted. The city is held together by rusted bolts and a crumbling social order, populated by splicers, citizens driven to insanity by their addiction to Adam, a substance that allows for instant genetic rewriting. In Bioshock, you play as Jack, the lone survivor of a mysterious plane crash in the middle of the ocean. With nowhere else to go, you descend into the city via a bathysphere. Soon, you are caught in the middle of a violent civil war between two men. Andrew Ryan, the city's creator who views you as a parasite from the surface. And Atlas, a revolutionary voice on the radio who promises to help you escape if you help him save his family. To survive, you must alter your DNA with plasmids, granting you superhuman abilities like firing bolts of lightning from your fingertips or swarming enemies with hornets. As you navigate the flooded halls and are confronted by the big daddies, you are forced to make a choice. Do you harvest the little sisters, the children who gather the city's precious Adam, or do you save them at the cost of your own strength? Now, before I actually get into discussing the game, I need to talk about the state of Bioshock on PC. There are two different versions you can play, the original and then the remaster. Before playing, I searched through Reddit to try and find out what the best way to play these games was. Like, do I go with the original and am I going to get a more authentic experience by playing the original game, or is it just better to go with the remaster? Did they fix loads of quality of life things? But the problem was the consensus was pretty mixed. I never got like a defined answer of this is the version you should play. One camp thinks it has to be the original, as the remaster altered some elements of the atmosphere and art direction. They also claim that the remaster has performance issues, frequent crashes, worse audio in sections, and then just overall worse audio mixing. But then there's the camp that thinks the remaster is the best way to play the games, as you have 4K support, higher frame rates, an FOV slider, director's commentary, different difficulty levels that you can choose. There's a few other things as well, but there's a lot of people that think you should just play the remaster. I actually decided to play the original as I wanted to experience the game as it was when it came out. The issue is that the original version does not run very well on modern hardware, and I kept encountering issue after issue. I installed mods to unlock frame rates of certain assets, which seemed to work. I even managed to get a mod to work that meant I could adapt the FOV slider of the game, but the one thing that I couldn't get to work was because the game wasn't made for widescreen monitors. When I'd be using my mouse, if I was going horizontally, it would work perfectly, but as soon as I was going vertically, it would just like slow down, or the mouse would stop in certain points. And it was so frustrating. I did realise that there was a fix that you could do for it, but it meant I was having to go into actual text files of the game and alter certain things. And I don't want to be jumping through those hoops to be playing a game. So after all that, I decided I was going to play the remaster, but I made sure to download some mods that would keep the game in line with the artistic intent of the original and also fix some of the audio issues that people had mentioned. I managed to install these mods pretty easily, but when I booted up the game, I was still having issue with the brightness slider. I don't know how in a remaster that came out like years after the original game, there's still issues like a brightness slider not working. So I eventually find a fix for that and I get into playing the game. I'm riding down the bathysphere down to Rapture. It's all going well, no issues. And then when the splicer first jumps on the bathysphere and there's like flickering light, my game was bugging out, like really badly bugging out. And I just kind of ignored it at first. I walked out, was doing a few things, but then every now and again when there was flashing light, my whole screen was glitching and bugging out. After doing some research, I realised it's because my PC was running the game at ridiculously high frame rates. The game engine just can't handle it and it causes some lighting to really bug out. So I managed to fix that by just capping the frame rate to 120 FPS. Fortunately, I didn't experience a single crash during my playthrough, which seems to be quite frequent for people playing the remaster. But I did experience one bug when I had my first combat encounter with a big daddy that was really frustrating. He got stuck in a wall and couldn't escape, which made what would have been a really intense and exciting first encounter just kind of meh. Like, this was my first combat encounter with a big daddy. Like, I should be kind of pooing myself a little bit and running around, but he was just glitched walking into a wall. It kind of ruined the tension a little bit. I just think as a whole though, it's quite sad that for someone on PC wanting to experience this game for the first time, there's not really a solid release for you to just pick up and play. You're having to decide between different versions, which compromises that you want to make, and even then you're having to jump through hoops to get that version to work. Don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to modding games, I've done it before, and I know that's just a reality of PC gaming, but you'd think when there's been a remaster release, they'd just have the game in a better state. I mean, to compare this with Portal and Portal 2 that I played recently, those games I booted up and they just worked straight away. There was no issue with it, there was no tinkering, the game just worked. And I just wish Bioshock was a smoother experience, as there's a lot of people that don't want to be tinkering around to get their games to work, and due to this they're going to miss out on a really great experience. Now I know you've not clicked on a video about someone's first impressions with Bioshock to hear them moaning about mods and performance issues, so let's actually get into talking about the game. Bioshock is hands down one of the most visually interesting games I've ever played. It honestly reminded me of my first playthrough of Batman Arkham Asylum, which came out 2 years later. They both share a grimy atmosphere, where the environments feel lived in and evoke a feeling of chaos and insanity. Now I know I was playing the remaster, so it probably looked better for me than people playing on release in 2007, but even when I played the intro on the original version of the game, it still looked great. It's not even about the fidelity of the textures, it's about the feel of the world. It felt claustrophobic yet expansive, exactly how I felt playing Arkham Asylum for the first time. I mean, even the opening of the game is a visual treat. You swim towards the massive monument, which is the entrance to Rapture. And then when you ride the bathysphere and see the city for the first time, it's genuinely incredible. It's one of the most mesmerising and hauntingly beautiful things I've seen in my whole time playing video games. The sense of scale of the city really helps the game feel bigger than it is. I mean, throughout your playtime, you're playing through areas and levels that feel pretty claustrophobic. It's just hallways into new rooms, and then every now and again it might open up into a slightly bigger space. It never really feels like you're in a small confined world though, because you'll walk into a room that has a glass window that shows the epic scale of the city. And it gives you the feeling that the world you're exploring is endless. The areas within the city were all visually appealing as well. My favourites being Fort Frolic, where we're introduced to Sander Cohen, and then I don't know how to pronounce this, but Hephaestus or Hephaestus, but it's where you go to destroy the core before you eventually confront Ryan. But every section of Rapture that you visit has its own personality and history just oozing from the walls and the floors. It's not just the audio tapes and the narration that help build an idea of Rapture's past and present. You also end up learning so much from environmental storytelling. The game is also terrifying in moments. There was a section right at the beginning where the lights go out and you can just hear the splicers running at you. I was completely terrified at the age of 26, so I can't imagine how I would have reacted if I was playing this game when it came out in 2007. It's funny because before playing, I always saw Bioshock as a pure horror game. In fact, when I did the poll for this video, I put it up against Resident Evil and Dead Space because I was just going for a horror theme. But it's first and foremost a first-person shooter with horror elements, which actually really surprised me. Overall though, Rapture just felt so visceral. It's one of the best settings in any game I've played, and it's worth experiencing Bioshock for that element alone. Now, I've got to be completely honest, I don't think I took in the story for this game as well as I would have liked to, and I don't think it's entirely my fault. The audio mixing in the remaster was awful.
Cohen's not a musician. He's Ryan's saving boy. Ryan's corrupt policies crap all over the place, and Cohen flutters around clearing it up. Instead of using shovels like you would with a problem, Cohen tidies with a catchy melody.
I had had to keep turning down the volume of all the elements but the voiceover so that I could actually hear it. I'd say about a quarter of the way through my playthrough, I found a good balance with the audio and I was able to understand what was being said, but it still took a little while for me to really care what was going on with the story, and I just didn't feel much of a connection to my player character or anyone else for that matter. The only really friendly voice was Atlas, but again, that was just a voice. And I have to say, I wrote in the notes on my second session of playing the game that I didn't trust Atlas. I'm sorry, but that Irish accent did not fool me for a second. But when the submarine is blown up and you think his family's dead, it didn't give me the feeling that I think the game was intending. To be honest, I didn't really care. I didn't know Atlas, I didn't know his family. At this point, I didn't really know who I was. I was intrigued by the world of Rapture and the political unrest that was unfolding, and I wanted to find out more about Atlas and Andrew Ryan, but I wasn't emotionally invested until much later in the game. You obviously encounter the scientist Longford at one point, but she's killed off before you're even able to develop some form of relationship with her, so it doesn't really hit when she's killed. I don't think it helps that a lot of the storytelling and world building was told through voiceover, and there were points where I was struggling to hear it. I actually think Levine's opposition to cutscenes meant I wasn't as invested as I could have been. Having a few more moments that forced you to stop and take in the exposition would have really aided my understanding of what was happening during a first playthrough. I think a lot of exposition is thrown at you through radio communications and tape recordings, but it's hard for you to know which information is key for you to take in and really focus on to understand the story more. I don't think it was until I went to Fort Frolic and had my encounter with Sander Cohen that the story and the game in general really clicked with me. I really enjoyed Cohen as an adversary. Having to kill his disciples one by one and then take photos to finish his masterpiece was dark, twisted, but interesting. I felt like I was slowly understanding Cohen as a character, which was making me more invested in what was happening. I had this briefly at the start of the game when you go up against Dr. Steinman and you slowly uncover his insanity as he's butchering his patients, but he didn't really have the same impact as Sander Cohen did. From Fort Frolic onwards though, this is where the game really kicks into gear and deserves all the praise that it receives. After defeating Cohen, you go to Hephaestus to destroy the core and then confront Andrew Ryan. He reveals the truth of your origins. You're Ryan's illegitimate son, sold by Ryan's mistress as an embryo to Fontaine, who had Tenenbaum and Sushong rapidly age you into adulthood and turned you into an obedient assassin. You were smuggled to the surface with false memories of a normal life, waiting to be called back to Rapture when needed. Ryan takes control of your actions by asking, "Would you kindly?" a phrase that has preceded many of Atlas's commands as a hypnotic trigger, forcing you to follow any orders without question. You also realise he was responsible for the plane crash, having read a letter on board containing the same trigger phrase. Ryan chooses to die by his own will and compels you to beat him to death with a golf club. Atlas then reveals himself to be Fontaine, having faked his death and used Atlas as an alias to hide his identity, while providing a heroic figure for the poor to rally behind. With Ryan dead, Fontaine takes control of the city and leaves you to be killed by hostile security drones. You're then saved by Dr. Tenenbaum and her little sisters and wake up in her hideout. Before playing this game, I knew absolutely nothing about the story. However, I was anticipating a plot twist at some point during the playthrough. It still really hit when the reveal happened though, and I was really captivated by what was happening. Even though I was struggling to connect with the story and my character at the beginning, by this point I was all in and everything clicked. I don't know if this is a common thing, but I was always distrustful of Atlas. Until I met him in person, I was always going to be questioning his true intentions, but I didn't know the extent of the deception. I had no clue that he was Fontaine and had been using mind control throughout the whole game, and that he'd engineered me to use as a pawn to take control of the city. The moment where Ryan orders you to kill him was really powerful. The repetition of the phrase, "a man chooses, a slave obeys," was harrowing.
A man chooses. A slave obeys.
as you realise most of your actions throughout the game have been you obeying orders. You have been Fontaine's slave without even realising it. The one aspect of the game that you do have a choice in is whether to harvest or save the little sisters. I'm happy to say that every little sister I came across, I saved. So in those instances, I was a man who made a choice and went against what Atlas wanted. Although thinking about it now, Atlas definitely wanted me to harvest the sisters, so he definitely could have just said, "Would you kindly harvest the sisters?" and I would have had to have done it. Not to get all cinema sins with the commentary, because you can really dig for plot holes in anything, and it didn't really ruin my experience. It's not something I noticed while playing the game, but yeah, Atlas definitely could have just forced me to harvest the sisters if he wanted to. When you get to the climax of the game though, and finally kill Fontaine during the final fight, your choices with the little sisters affect the outcome. If you rescue all of the little sisters, Jack takes them back to the surface with him and adopts 5 of them as his daughters. Tenenbaum happily narrates how they go on to live full lives under his care, eventually surrounding him on his deathbed. If you harvest any of the little sisters, Jack turns on the little sisters to harvest their Adam. Tenenbaum condemns Jack as he leads a group of splicers to take over a nuclear warhead armed submarine. Depending on how many of the little sisters are harvested, Tenenbaum's narrative changes from sad and mournful to angry and harsh. I'm so happy I made the choice I did, as the ending I got was beautiful. I was genuinely on the verge of tearing up, which is a massive compliment to Bioshock, as the only game that has made me cry is Red Dead Redemption 2. Overall though, the story was really captivating, and I think I'll enjoy it even more on a second playthrough now I know the context of what's going on a little bit more. I am really jealous of the people got to play it for the first time when it came out, as this level of quality in video game narratives would have been groundbreaking. The mechanics are the part of the game where I probably struggled the most, and I have a few criticisms. The plasmids are superhuman powers that include things like being able to shoot electricity from your fingertips or hypnotising a Big Daddy to protect you from splicers. You also have a selection of weapons that range from a wrench to a shotgun to a flamethrower. You also had the ability to hack drones and turrets via a little minigame. Now this was okay, it did get a little bit repetitive. I think it was just a case of spam as many tiles early as possible to see what selection you have and which paths are blocked. But as you got further in the game, some of the puzzles did get a little bit more challenging. Now if I'm being completely honest, it took a little while for me to enjoy the combat mechanics. I started, as I do with every game I play, selecting the hardest difficulty. This was a mistake, as this level of difficulty wasn't even enjoyable. I very quickly turned it down to normal and started to enjoy the combat a lot more, but even then the gunplay didn't feel great. The weapons weren't the most satisfying to use, and most of the time you didn't have ammo for them as it was really limited. I understand they were going for an immersive sim feel to the game, so you're meant to be searching around scavenging items and ammo, but it just meant that I really struggled to enjoy the combat in moments. It wasn't until I built my character around a melee playstyle that I actually started enjoying engaging with enemies. I'd use the lightning plasmid to hit the target and then run in and kill them with the wrench. I used all the buffs on my character that increased the melee damage and restored health when doing melee attacks. This ended up being really effective and subsequently enjoyable to play. I also wasn't having to constantly worry about ammunition and swapping out weapons mid-fight while being swarmed by multiple splicers. It's not like I was low on ammo because I wasn't searching for items or scavenging for ammo. If anything, I've got a really bad habit of checking every crevice in games to make sure I don't miss a single resource or a single bit of loot. But even then, it felt like I never had any ammo and I was always running out. It meant I was going into some areas feeling like I had no chance to get past the enemies in front of me, which to be fair might have added some stakes and tension to the game if it wasn't for the Vita chambers. Now I don't know if this is controversial or if this is a common thought. I've not really looked up what other people think about this game, but Vita chambers are easily the worst thing about Bioshock. It's not like a normal checkpoint system where you die and it takes you back to that checkpoint at the moment you originally passed it. No, when you die in Bioshock, it takes you back to the checkpoint, but all your actions leading up to your death remain. Meaning you can run into a room, take out half an enemy's health, be killed, and then run back in and finish him off. I think this system was put in place because without it, I think the game would have genuinely been too difficult for most players, me included. I definitely could have got through the game eventually if I turned them off, but it just wouldn't have been enjoyable. I think the balancing of the difficulty and the ammo distribution fell off, so to counteract it, they put in these overpowered respawns that meant you could just keep carrying on where you left off. The issue is that this respawn system takes away most of the jeopardy from dying in this game. Why use a health pack when you're about to die when you know you're going to respawn moments later in the exact situation you're already in with half your health and Eve restored? There's no penalty to dying except maybe the inconvenience of having to run back to where you got to in the level. And I know some people are thinking if you hated the Vita Chambers so much, just turn them off, it's an option in the menus. The problem there is that the game would have then just been way too difficult and I would have got incredibly frustrated. I think the Vita Chamber system could still work, but when you die and respawn, I think you should lose the progress that you've made. It should just act as a traditional checkpoint marker, and I know obviously you can turn them off and just go based on when the game saves, but from my experience, the game wasn't auto-saving very often, so if you made a load of progress and died just before the game auto-saved, it would have sent you so far back. So just having that little change of the Vita Chambers sending you back, but you losing the progress, I think would have added a little bit more jeopardy to dying in the game, and made you go in with the approach of you can't just run in and die and then just keep going back, like you Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow. And I know some people might just think it's a skill issue, but I tend to play games on the hardest difficulty and I still enjoy them. I completed The Witcher 3 and its DLCs on Death March difficulty, and I played Baldur's Gate 3 for over 100 hours on Tactician. On my second playthrough, I might just turn Vita Chambers off and try and save as much as possible, and it might be that I enjoy that aspect of the game a lot more, but I just think from the way the game is vanilla, like the original experience that everyone played when the game came out, I just think it's really poorly designed. And it just felt like the overall balancing of the difficulty and the ammo distribution was off. Another example is the final boss fight. Bear in mind, I was dying a fair amount through my playthrough, and in moments I was really struggling just on normal difficulty. But the final boss fight I finished in a few minutes and had absolutely no challenge at all, like it was a walk in the park. It's meant to be the finale of the game where I'm pushed to take advantage of all the mechanics and weapons that I've got in my arsenal, but it just felt so easy. Before you walk into that room, you're given the opportunity to just load up on all the ammo you need for all the overpowered weapons, and it meant walking in there I could just spam him with grenades, and it meant it ended way quicker than it should have. And again, I know you could say, well, just don't use the overpowered weapons, but why give me them then? Like, why give me the weapons and the ammo in the final boss fight if it's not fun to use them? It just felt like early on in the game, I was really struggling. I had no ammo, the difficulty was really high, and then I'm getting to the final bit of the game and I've got a plethora of ammo, the difficulty feels really low, and it ends really quickly. I think it should have maybe been the other way around. I think it should have got more challenging the further the game got. I did like the section leading up to the finale where you take your first dose of lot 192 and you can't control which plasmid powers you're using, it's just like a random roulette of all the powers. And this was really interesting because it forced me to use some of the powers that I just hadn't touched throughout my playthrough. And it did make me think this would have been a really cool thing to implement in the finale of the game where you're going up in the final boss fight and you're forced to use all the different powers. Look, I'm not a developer, so take my suggestions with a pinch of salt. You might listen to what I'm saying and think that it sounds ridiculous, but I don't know, I just thought it was a bit underwhelming, the final boss fight. Don't get me wrong, I loved exploring Rapture and slowly uncovering more of the story, but some of the sections in between those big narrative moments felt like a real slog. Maybe in 2007 it wasn't as much of an issue, like maybe these mechanics didn't feel as outdated as they do right now, but for me playing in 2026, I just had a few issues with it, the Vita Chambers being the main thing, but again, some of the balancing and especially how underwhelming that final boss fight was. Overall though, I thoroughly enjoyed my playthrough of Bioshock. The setting of Rapture is easily one of my favourites in all of video games, and the story is something that will stick with me for a very long time. It's an experience that I'm definitely going to want to go and replay with the knowledge that I now have and the context that I was missing on the first playthrough. I may have had my quarrels with the combat and respawn mechanics, but once I found a build and playstyle that was effective, I still had fun battling against the splicers. I think it's a game that everyone should experience, and it holds up really well considering it's approaching its 20th anniversary. Even if I believe it has a couple of flaws, I think it was groundbreaking for narrative-focused experiences within gaming, and I would still consider it a masterpiece. It's not perfect, but it laid the groundwork for so many more games that were released after it. I haven't done any research into this, so it's purely speculation, but I'd be really surprised if Bioshock didn't inspire Batman Arkham Asylum in any way. And that is one of my favourite games of all time, so I would be silly not to give Bioshock its flowers. As Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Bioshock is the giant, and without it, many of the games released over the last 19 years that I've grown to love might not exist, or at least not in the same way. Thanks again for watching another one of my video essays as I try to clear my massive gaming backlog. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like as it helps the video be recommended to new people. Subscribe as well if you want to see more video essays on a variety of classic and modern games. I'm only a small channel and it takes a lot of time and effort to produce these videos, so any support is really appreciated. I released a poll to decide my next video and the choices were Mafia, Sleeping Dogs and GTA 4. You guys have voted for GTA 4, so that'll be the next game that I focus a video on. The next set of choices, I'm going with a theme of PlayStation narrative based games, so the choices are going to be Uncharted 4, God of War and The Last of Us. Look out for that poll on my YouTube community so you can have your say on what game I play next.
It was a pretty good game. Took a while for it to click for me, but when it clicked, it really clicked. That was beautiful. I was on the verge of tearing up there. The only game that's made me cry is Red Dead Redemption 2, but I was very close then, I can't lie. That was beautiful.